With the advancement of technology, tattoos have leveled up long ago. Any favorite superhero or character could be tattooed on your body nearly in HD quality, and it seems that 4K will be available soon. There is this, and this, and even that. 15% of adult population on Earth have at least one tattoo. Nowadays, people are making tattoos with Captain America, Batman, or Deadpool. And what kind of designs did the ancient people inked? As was written by loved fewer than all Charles Darwin in The Descent of Man, and selection in relation to sex. Not one great country can be named, from the polar regions in the north to New Zealand in the south, in which the Aborigines do not tattoo themselves. Considering all that, tattoos are entirely human creation, as no animal species had ever deliberately harmed themselves in order to embellish their body. If you're wondering in what part of the world, at what historical era, and for what reasons people of various ethnicities have gotten their bodies tattooed, then you should absolutely watch this film. Let's go! To begin with, where the word tattoo comes from, it originates from the Tahitian word tata. Polynesians are considered one of the most ancient ethnicities that use tattoos in their daily life. The word has spread widely at 1773. Thanks to the British explorer James Cook. He used it in his reports about his trip around the globe. Here is how James Cook described Tahitians' tattoos. Both sexes paint their bodas tattoo, as it is called in their language. This is done by inlaying the color of black under their skins in such a manner as to be indelible. This is a painful operation, especially the tattooing their buttocks. Although the traveler found the whole process of getting a tattoo pretty painful, several crewmen from his ship had taken an interest in this kind of creativity and got themselves inked. These men indeed are considered to be the pioneers of a tattoo trend in European society. Remarkable that the first person to ever tell about a tattoo in Russia was of the same cloth. It was none other than Captain Ivan Krusenstern. There are no hard historical evidences that our ancient ancestors used to get inked, although one ancient Arab explorer and writer in the essay Notes on a Journey to the Volga emphasized that Ruthenians had various pagan symbols tattooed on them. Modern perception of the tattoo is vastly different from that of ancient folks. If today we imagine a clean, beautiful salon, where we're getting inked fast and almost painlessly by a special machine, in ancient times tattoos were basically patterns of scars, where powdery epigene chemicals were inserted in fresh wounds that were considered as pigments at the time. Or there could be no pigments at all, just some cuts on the skin that formed a certain patterns of scars. These procedures were far from sanitary, therefore it could be lethal. But that doesn't stop some of the African tribes from using the same methods even nowadays, as a tribute to the traditions. For obvious reasons, insertion of dark or colorful patterns in particular was more popular among white folks. Meanwhile, the people of color preferred scarification. Thus, such images from the movie about Black Panther don't step too far from reality. After all, it could look even more astonishing, for example like this. Or like that here. Just look. How many amazing pictures have lasted to these days? Then again, nothing holds from getting mixing it. For example, in Republic of Benin, that is a small West African country, the representatives of indigenous people embellish their faces with both tattoo and scarification. That said, in big cities of this country, such decoration of a face is against the law. Therefore, this tradition lives out its days only in backwaters. It's not just the law, people themselves are shifting away from this tradition. Young people aren't fond of having significant scars on their faces, like their mothers and fathers. Besides, parents who earned a modern degrees have an understanding that scarification is a cruel and painful procedure, and they don't want their children to get through it, given that in some traditions they undergo scarification at the age of 2. How did humans came up with something that no other species on Earth could? Well, the most logical suggestion is the following. Ancient men often got injured during hunting and the scars remained. The more scars a man had, the braver and stronger he appeared to all. There is still a saying that scars are man's badges of honor. With the passage of time, people began to inflict such injuries on themselves, and not only men, but also women did this. First mentions of body patterns belong to 400 BC. This information was confirmed by archaeologists who found figurines covered with body patterns during excavations in Egypt, and the carbon analysis of the remains of ancient people also confirms the ancient origin of tattoos. Moreover, the patterns could only be found on bodies of kings and noble Egyptians, What implicates that at that era tattoos were a mark of privileges here is an example of the tattoo on the Egyptian mummy's skin, which was called Priestess of Hathor. She had images of lotus flowers on her thighs, cows on her arms and monkeys on her forearms. On her neck, shoulders, and back there was a tattoo of the sacred eye of Hathor goddess. The scientists had discovered that the tattoos weren't made during the Egyptian rite of embalming, as was sometimes done, and she had all of them during her life. Tattoos were discovered, of course, not only on mummies in Egypt. By now the oldest carrier of tattoos according to the Guinness Book of Records is ethnicities. His tattoos are unions of dots and lines, mostly concentrated in acupuncture zones. Researchers generally accept that these tattoos had a healing meaning. Supposedly, this way ethnicities tried to get rid of arthritic pains. There are 61 tattoos on ethnicities' body altogether. Another tattooed mummy is Princess of Yukok. This find is also known as Altai Princess, and foreign resources often mention it as the Siberian Ice Maiden. By the way, according to some historians, she was not a princess and did not belong to the ruling dynasties. Indeed, her burial site was so luxurious that the conclusion about her exceptional social position suggested itself. However, the experts claim that she was only a wealthy representative of the middle class during the golden age of the Pazer culture. Together with the princess deceased at the age of 25 were also buried 6 horses, all harnessed and saddled, ready to go on a journey through the world of the dead at any moment. Princess's body was dressed in luxurious clothes, while the harness and saddles of horses are unique pieces of handicraft art of that time. The skin of the princess is embellished with high-quality tattoos of various fantastic beasts. For example, on the left shoulder, there is a perfectly preserved tattoo depicting a deer with a bird's beak. Historians claim that this is the first example of animalistic tattoos. Earlier tattoos were purely ornamental. And this is the mummy of a man from the Pazyryk gravesite in Gorny Altai. The man was buried along with the horse. Also in the burial chamber were a dagger and a bow with arrows. On the shoulder is an image of a griffin. Fast forward to South America, Peru. The mummy found there in 2006 made a real fuss among those who researched the Indians of the pre-Columbian era. It was a woman identified as the ruler of the Moche people who inhabited the western coast of the Pacific Ocean. The Moche civilization was quite advanced, but bloody rituals were widely practiced in its culture, during which human sacrifices were made to the gods. There is an assumption that the decline of the Moche civilization, which occurred around the 13th century AD, is associated precisely with religious hysteria, which has become all-encompassing. The Moche Indians came up with the idea of solving all of their problems by appeasing the gods. Enormous funds were invested in temples and rituals, which deserved a better use. And more young people were sacrificed. The hands of the ancient ruler were decorated with sleeve tattoos, which were the images of snakes, spiders, and other traditional ornamental elements of the Indians of South America. Lady cow's feet were also covered in tattoos. Another South American find is Ice Maiden Momia Juanita. She was found in 1999 frozen in ice on the slope of the Sabancaya volcano, Peru. Several children's corpses were found with her. Next to the bodies were found golden figurines and various ritual clothing. It is assumed that a large ornamental tattoo, that covers almost the entire body of the girl, was a part of the preparation for the ritual of sacrifice. Tattoos have also been discovered on the so-called Darim mummies. These are representatives of the Caucasian race, who several thousand years ago were the indigenous population of Western China. The garments in which the dead were dressed are identical to the garments worn by representatives of the tribes of Central Russia. And these are not the only wandering representatives of the northern tribes. The nature, number, and huge area where the burial sites of Europeans are scattered in China indicate that they were the ones who lived a settled life there. In the early Chinese chronicles there are also references about white people with long blonde hair. The most interest attracts the family mound, where the bodies of a man, 3 women, and a very small child were found. Supposedly they were all members of one family and died from some kind of infection. The faces of the man and one of the women were heavily tattooed. Upon the opening of another wealthy princely burial, the body of a man was found, with tattoo on his face, an image of the outstretched wings of a falcon on both cheeks. Now let's head north, beyond the Arctic Circle, or rather, to the west coast of Greenland. In 1972, a grave was found here by local hunters, in which 8 human bodies rested. The faces of the dead women were adorned with a traditional Inuit tattoo that a Canadian group of activists is trying to revive. All these examples, among other things, are interesting because of showing the difference between ancient tattoos and modern ones. Now people use tattoos exclusively as an element of decoration, and the meaning of the drawing on the body depends on what is in the head of the person who placed it. That is, he himself puts the meaning into the drawing, as ancient people in such a way mostly designated their belonging to a certain ancestry, tribe, profession, or rather, they made marks on the body to show their social upbringing. Well, or in other versions, they believed that the magical power of the images on the body would protect them from evil spirits and bring them closer to their gods. And this aspect was important in the war paints of different peoples, for example, the Celts. The Greeks called the word Celts all the inhabitants of the northern countries, meaning hundreds of different tribes. The Roman poet Claudian wrote, "The legion curbed the wild Scots and studied the steel-colored patterns on the faces of the slain." The writer Tertullian also mentions the bluish-gray drawings on the bodies of the barbarians. After the decline of the so-called Roman Empire, Isidore of Seville described the peculiarities of the tattooing, which was used by the Britons and Picts. The Pictish tribe got its name for their bodies. They are pricking the skin with needles and then rub the squeezed juice of a local plant into it. As a result, marks remain on the skin, indicating the status of the person. A tattoo on the limbs is meant to show a noble origin. The most popular tattoo subjects among the Picts and Britons were various animals and birds. Especially often came across the image of bulls, which symbolized strength, pressure, frenzied energy, and courage. A plant called Isatis tinctoria was used for the tattoo. It gave a blue-green pigment for the ink. Although Lindau man, that is a well-preserved mummy of a man in a peat land, was tattooed with clay that has a high content of copper, malachite, and azurite. The Roman publicist Herodian noted that all Caledonians loved to paint their bodies in intricate colors. Turns out that pale blue, green, and dark blue were hardly the only colors for body art. There is also a tradition associated with tattoos, which is quite barbaric in the modern view, the severed mokomokai heads. In culture of Maori tribes, tattoos were worn by everyone without exception. Only slaves were forbidden to have prints on a body. A man without a tattoo in the culture of the indigenous tribes of New Zealand was not worthy of anything. They were designated by the words moko or toi moko. In Maori language there is such a word as mokomokai. Its meaning comes from the tradition of cutting off the head of a dead man who has a tattoo on his face, drying it, and then keeping it as a family heirloom. Well, just like nowadays, many people keep a cinerary urn containing ashes of their grandfather on a fireplace shelf. The dried mokomokai heads became almost the main trading item in New Zealand since the first days Europeans invaded the lands that belonged to the Maori tribes for thousands of years. Aborigines gladly exchanged family heirlooms for firearms, which were then used in feuds. In the 1860s, one officer served in the English colonial army. His name was Horatio Gordon Robley. The moment he arrived in New Zealand, he fell in love with this country and became keen on its history. He was a gifted illustrator, and one of the passions that devoured him completely was studying of the local tattoo culture. First published in 1896, Moko or Maori Tattooing is considered to be one of the best books in the field to this day. Despite the imposed ban for trading dried heads, Horatio Gordon Robley managed to build an impressive collection of mokomokai, which counted more than 40 objects. And, of course, China, where tattoos had been used for ages. During ancient times, indelible hieroglyphs were only used to mark criminals and slaves. Despite the imposed ban for trading dried heads, Horatio Gordon Robley managed to build their social collection of mokomokai, which counted more than 40 objects. Next, tattoos moved from China to Japan. The profession of a tattoo artist was very prestigious, and it was quite difficult to attain, because the master had to be skillful not only in transferring images on the body, but also in mixing paints, drawing, and even knowledgeable in history of motherland. Whole 5 years had to be spent to master this art. This training also included very interesting exams, where future tattoo artists had to make a tattoo on their master's leg first, and then on their own leg. Only after all these difficult tests, the students became apprentices and were admitted to the clients. Due to such hardships in tattoo artists' education, tattoos became an ultra-privileged way of embellishing the body, affordable only for emperors and their confidants. Over time, the meaning of tattoos began to change and the nobility began using it, since it was still an expensive process. Also, women began getting inked in order to show their stamina and fertility with the quantity of tattoos. Samurai got tattoos of sakura flowers, as a statement that they were ready to die right on the battlefield, since the life of a flower is as fleeting as the life of a samurai. Later, a certain tattoo became a mark for criminals. A hieroglyph of a dog, that consisted 3 lines, was drawn on the forehead of a person. Each line was drawn after 1 violation of the law, and after 3 violations, all 3 lines formed the hieroglyph of a dog. In those days, this word was the worst cursing word for a person. Additionally, the tools for tattoos also developed. In Japan, rather than anywhere else, metal needles came into use instead of chisels, branches, and animal teeth. At last, tattoos became an essential symbol of the Yakuza. 70% of the body of any Yakuza member was covered with tattoos, and since tattooing was far from the most pleasant and easy process, and took more than a dozen hours, it was believed that the more the body surface was covered with drawings, the stronger, more enduring, and merciless Yakuza warrior was. And these are traditional Berber face tattoos on women. The population of Morocco contains 2 ethnic groups in equal proportions, the Berbers and the Arabs. Look, these drawings, symbols are very similar to what needle women depicted on Slavic towels. From ancient times, Berber women decorated their faces with sacred geometric symbols. It was believed that these symbols protected women from evil spirits, because the Berbers were pagans before the Islam. And also the face tattoo was something like a sign of beauty. The more tattoos there were, the more beautiful was the woman. Therefore, they got tattooed in their youth, usually at the age of 12 to 13. With the arrival of the Arabs in North Africa and the establishment of their power, it became forbidden to apply face tattoos, as this is contrary to the rules of Islam and is considered a sin. But in recent times, the cult of Berber tattoos has gained new power in a softer form of temporary makeup. Well, the tattoo culture of this folk, who inhabit the mountainous area in the central part of India, have existed for more than 2,000 years. Girls get tattooed everywhere: the face, the arms, the legs, the stomach, the back. Tattoo artists are also women who take over the skill from their mothers. Thus, the profession of tattooing in the Baiga tribe is hereditary. Girls usually get tattoos at the age of 10 to 12. It is believed that the pain that they have to experience in the process of tattooing is a kind of training before what they will have to endure during childbirth. And the unique type of Baiga ornaments is necessary so that after death in the kingdom of the dead, it would be easier for fellow tribesmen to find each other. Well, as in many previous examples, today parents in the Baiga tribe do not tattoo their children, explaining this by the fact that they do not want their offspring to live in the village all their lives, doing farming. They want their children to get higher education, and tattoos will prevent them from living in the city and attending schools. The Baiga tribe is not the only greeting from the Indian past. In the western part of the Indochina Peninsula, in the state of Myanmar, also known as Burma, and today you can find women wearing traditional tribal tattoos on their faces. Various patterns cover their faces and all are denoted by one word, which in translation means web. The center of the web is usually located in the center of the forehead and symbolizes the sun, and the stripes diverging from the eyes are a pattern on the muzzle of a tiger. There is also another kind of tattoo. It is worn by representatives of the Mian tribe. Usually it is a composition of points, lines, and sometimes circles. A lot of unusual things are associated with this Mian tribe, such as huge earrings made of beads, plus the way they play the flute, not with their mouth, but with their nose. And the most memorable type of Myanmar women's tattoo is a face completely covered with pigment. This is a distinctive feature of the women of the Yupu tribe. The traditional instruments for tattooing for the tribes inhabiting Myanmar are a bundle of 3 needles made of bamboo, or a thorn of a thorn bush. A mixture of cow bile, soot, juice of various plants, and pork fat is used as a coloring pigment, and bean leaves were used as a healing gel for tattoos. But here, too, the tradition of tattooing the face is fading out. Now only a few remain faithful to this ancient fashion. But it's time to move on to Europe. Because of the Christian religion, tattoos were banned here, as it was considered to be devilish symbols, for which one could even burn a person at the stake. It was until the 18th century, until above-mentioned James Cook sailed from Polynesia with new information about the meaning of the tattoo. By the way, for illustrative purpose, Cook also brought to the mainland one of the local Aborigines, who was covered with tattoos from head to toe. And over time, the Europeans liked the show so much that every decent circus had to have its own painted aborigine in the troupe. A century later, Europeans themselves became such aborigines, who covered their bodies with tattoos and became performers in the circus. Then one landmark event happened in 1891. The first tattoo machine was invented by the American O'Reilly. And what is called, away we go. When the process of tattooing became easier, a lot of tattoo salons opened up, where anyone could get tattooed. One of the most famous tattoo artists in America at the time was the Sailor Jerry. He had greatly influenced the evolution of tattoo art in the 20th century, and is considered the founding father of the old school style. Thanks to him, during 50s and 60s tattoo art gained immense popularity in America, both copying the old styles invented by the Polynesian natives, and giving rise to a number of new trends. But this all is in America and how things were in Russia. As you remember, little is known about the tattoos on the bodies of the ancient Slavs, except for the notes of an Arab traveler. He described the green patterns on the bodies of the Russians, which folded into trees and animals. Besides, it is known that the folks inhabiting the north of Russia, the Chukchi, Mansi, Koryaks, made tattoos to protect themselves from evil spirits since ancient times. The southern Slavs who lived at the Balkans also embellished themselves with tattoos. Tattoos were given to young girls as a sign of their belonging to the tribe, and when they were married off, new ones were added to the old tattoos. And, to continue our review, it's time to go back to Krusenstern, who prepared many books for publication after his trip around the world. The most famous one is the Atlas of Krusenstern. It was published first in 1809. Although the book is named after Krusenstern, it would not have came to live without the participation of a Russian researcher and ethnographer of German origin whose name is Grigory Ivanovich Langsdorff. He was the author of most part of the illustrative material of the Atlas, including images of tattooed local residents of Nukajiva Island, which is located in the heart of the South Pacific Ocean. Some sailors from the Krusenstern team brought, as they say, on themselves these overseas patterns. The last Russian Emperor Nicholas II also had a tattoo. During his trip to Japan, he was so inspired by the work of tattoo artists that he got the tattoo of a dragon. 23-year-old Nikolai described it this way in a letter to his sister, Grand Duchess Xenia. After dinner during a stopover in the Japanese city of Nagasaki, I decided to get a tattoo of a dragon on my right arm. It took precisely 7 hours from 9 p.m. to 4 a.m. The dragon turned out splendid, and it didn't hurt at all. In 1907, 15 years after Nikolai Romanov acquired a dragon, the first artistic tattoo salon opened its doors in St. Petersburg. But still, this procedure was a rather rare exotic done by sailors and outrageous aristocratic bohemians. However, concurrently, at the same historical time, a criminal tattoo also was flourishing. It has its own history, worthy of a separate video, but in short, it was like this. The forerunners of the thieves' tattoos were the stamps burned on the body of a criminal. So, in Russia, since 1691, stamping had become mandatory for everyone who was sent into exile instead of the death penalty. The word VOR was burned on the forehead of a Russian convict, first with a red-hot iron, and then with a special plate with needles that hit the person, and after that the wound was rubbed with gunpowder. A bit later they began using a mixture of ochre and ink instead of gunpowder. So at beginning of the early 1900s, thieves' tattoos were already widespread among the convicts of Sakhalin, the criminal world of St. Petersburg and Moscow. And after the October Revolution, when non-criminal tattoos were banned, becoming a bourgeois relic of the Tsarist regime, tattoos become obligatory hallmarks of the thieves' hierarchy. Certainly, this does not mean that only criminal tattoos existed at that time. There were a lot of things, both naval and military, and agitational or political, in the so-called yard tattoos. Here is how director Georgie Dan Elliott described it. In the summer of 1941 in Tbilisi, I went swimming in the thermal bath. Back then, as now, tattoos were in fashion, and I had a small anchor tattooed on my arm. Then I gave the same anchor to my friend, Shurik Muratov. Then another boy from school, a heart pierced by an arrow, and I became a fashionable tattooist. I tattooed anchors, hearts, daggers. I tattooed an eagle carrying a woman's head on my chest to Hamlet, the son of a policeman. The eagle looked like a chicken, but everyone liked it. During the Khrushchev thaw, tattoos had already begun taking on a romantic appearance, thanks to the songs of bards, including Vladimir Vysotsky. This became the basis for the manifestation of the tattoo as a symbol of freedom, sex, and rock and roll later. And already in the 1980s, the first colored rock tattoos appeared, and more people from the rock underground make tattoos and thereby popularize them in Russia. At first, Leningrad becomes the heart of this whole process, and a little later Moscow. This is a minor immersion in the history of tattoos that we have prepared for you. Thank you for watching and for your likes and comments, because it is the audience response that inspires us to prepare new topics for you. See you soon on our channel.